Hi, this is Catherine Korostoff. I've had a number of questions recently about crosstabs, really, and people asking me to define what a crosstab is and how to use it. And I think one of the best things to do is actually to look at a real world example. In this case, I'm using a data set from a survey conducted by Ask Your Target Market. And when you finish a survey project in Ask Your Target Market, you do get a default report, and that's what we're looking at here. So in this case, you can see that the name of the survey was Casual Games, that there were 1,000 total respondents, and the data collection was completed on August 11th, 2011. Now, when you first get to your default report and Ask Your Target Market, so when you've completed your data collection, or even if you're just looking during the data collection process, maybe every few hours you want to check in and see what your data is starting to look like, this is the default look. So you have all of your charts and graphs here on the right hand side for every question. Now, when it comes to crosstabs, the important thing to remember is that a crosstab is very simply when you look at any piece of data by some other variable. So for example, very often we want to look at our data by gender or by age group. For example, in this case we have the question, how many times have you played any of the Angry Birds series of games? The answer options are 0, selected by 57% of our respondents, 1 to 9, selected by 17% of our respondents, and so on. So you can see that this is the distribution of responses for this question. Now, I may have a hypothesis that says that the answers to this question may vary a lot by age. I may have a hypothesis that says, I bet that the people who said 0, that they've never played any of the Angry Birds series of games, are more likely to be people from certain age groups than others, or certain genders than others. But let's take a look at the age group distribution, because that's the one I've got the most burning hypothesis about. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's some icons. They're all pretty self-explanatory. But if you ever have a doubt, just hover over it. So I'm going to say, let's look at this data by age. I click the age icon and I select Update. And now the Ask Your Target Market platform is updating all of my charts to show that crosstab. It's going to show how the distribution of answers varies by age range. The age ranges are 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, and so on. So how did my hypothesis pan out? If I look at the people whose answer option was 0, that is, they've never played any of the Angry Bird games, how does that distribution show? Well, it looks to me like my hypothesis that there is a variation by age is correct. For example, if I look at the distribution of 0, of how many people by age range said they've never played the game, you can see that I've got a good chunk of my respondents who are from the let's say it looks to be the 45 and higher age range are in the 0 category. So of the people who said 0, for example, 25.7% were 45 to 54 years old, 15.5% were 55 to 64 years old, and 3.5 are over 65. If, on the other hand, I look at the people who've played the game the most, the people who've played the games at least 25 times and more, you can see that there's a little bit of a different distribution. You can see that I have very few percents of those older age groups who report having played the game over 25 times. So this is a great way to just visually tell me very quickly, do answers to this particular question vary by age group? And I can see that they do. Now, while typically when we're looking at crosstabs, it's very common to be looking at things by, say, gender and age group. Those are typical demographic crosstabs. There are other times where we might want to look at how questions in a survey vary by another question in the survey. So for example, we're looking here at the point of how many times people have played the game. All right, well that's interesting. Well, you know what? Later in the survey, I've got a question, I think, about what types of devices people have played Angry Birds on. Now, wouldn't it be interesting to see if behaviors and attitudes towards Angry Birds as a game varied by the type of device? Maybe I have a hypothesis that says, you know, the people who are playing on an iPhone have different attitudes and behaviors than people who are, say, playing on an Android phone or playing on a PC. So I do have the ability with the platform to very easily filter the responses by a particular answer to another question in the survey. It's not just all about demographics. So I might decide to go back up and remove my age crosstab. So now that's gone. I'm updating that. Now you can see I've gone back to my total. So I can go back up and I can select answer 1, which I know is the iPhone answer, and now I can apply that to all of the questions in the survey and see how the iPhone users look across the entire survey results. So when I do that, now I've got, instead of it based on 1,000 people, I'm just looking at 75 filtered responses. So it's obviously a much smaller sample size, but still may be worthwhile to me based on my objectives. I'm interested in understanding how iPhone users may have some distinct behaviors here. And already you can see something very interesting when I filtered just for the iPhone users. Look at how the frequency of how many times they've played the game changes. You really see that the iPhone users are much more frequent players than the non-iPhone users. So again, in this case, it's not strictly a crosstab. That is, we're not looking specifically at subgroups within each bucket. It's really more of a filter, but it really does give you a lot of the same benefits of doing a conventional crosstab in that you can look at subgroups of your population very easily. So again, depending on what your objectives are for your research project, in some cases you may be looking to understand just how all of the respondents to a survey answered all of the questions. Sometimes you may want to look at things by demographic variables, and in other cases you might want to look at the results by answers to another specific question. I hope that gives you a good understanding of what crosstabs are all about. Thanks.